Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to the April edition of Molten Music Monthly. We seem to have an enormous amount of modular this month, so I've sort of squeezed that into its own section so that we don't feel overwhelmed, because not everyone is modular patching, not everyone has devoted their life and given themselves over to the hobby. The deep dark hole of Eurorack Modular. And so I thought I'd bring the more useful, mainstream, wider application things a bit more to the front. So what do we have coming up? Well, Music Thing has a mini MIDI mover. Elk Live goes free. Bastl Instruments wants to be your BFF. Bitwig Studio celebrates version 5 with envelopes. Intellijel basks in Cascadian glory. Now I know that's a little bit modular, right? But it's not modular enough just to bring it out of the modular section into the main section, because it's kind of modular but semi-modular and a bit more of a synth, really. You see, so I'm going to put that here rather than there. I hope that's okay and I'm not confusing anyone. Entropy and Sons gets kaleidoscopic with our future. Compressor and Guitari does mono multitrack. Akuto Studio makes chords posh. Polyend makes trackers smaller. Muse Ovations isn't really very sure about the Beatwarp. Black BT goes for wireless sustain. Lumen makes the handpan electric. And in our big bumper bonanza of Eurorack, we have things like an acronym, uncertainty, compressors, white rabbits, meridians, looping delays and samplers, quad lo-fi samplers, CS20 filters, Triphase oscillators, TAZM-O, Verb filter, and Behringer has a few more bits. But first, NAMM. You kind of would have thought that this would be a NAMM special. It's usually this sort of time of year that I do my NAMM special. Just had NAMM, should have a NAMM special. Where the heck is my NAMM special, I hear you saying? Well, honestly, NAMM just was not that special. I mean, it has its moments. Lots of guitars, lots of percussion, accordions. No, that's Frankfurt. What else does it have? Oh yeah, I mean, there's always a big Pro Tools thing, and there's lots of organs and pianos and keyboards. But in terms of synthesizers, there wasn't a lot. There wasn't even, not even Jacob from Sheer Electronics was there showing us the latest version of his Oberheim What's It. Not even that. So it's all a little bit slim pickings on the old NAMM floor. However, did see Corey Feldman, that was exciting, and Stevie Wonder, but then he's always there. He was there the last time I was there, which was at least 25 years ago. So there were moments of excitement, but I think the wind really has gone out of NAMM. A few years ago, 2017, 2018, it was a massive synth event. Huge. You know, you could guarantee there'd be a Korg release, a sequential release. Oberheim, Tom was there, Oberheim doing something interesting. There was a whole packed in bit of modular stuff that was bubbling and going about the place. It was exciting, and you kind of feel the anticipation as soon as you get past sort of Christmas, New Year, because NAMM traditionally is at the end of January. And in all of that lead up, in that real dead time after New Year's Eve, stuff would leak and stuff would come out, and we'd actually get, you know, physically noticeably excited, and then you'd spend the entire show, or I would, actually sitting on my computer writing stuff up massively. News, videos, new gear. Very exciting. And then you'd have a live stream, have a party about it. Woo! But of course, since COVID, when they couldn't do it, and then when they had a virtual one, and then they've moved it about the place, they had a summer one last year. This year it's in April. It's not really found its feet since. However, next year it's back in January again, and maybe that will be the start of it becoming something. I think a lot of it is because it's an old school show. It has very much an older mentality of how things are done. So in terms of music technology in the music industry, NAMM is all about the dealers. It's all about networking between these sales reps and these sales reps and this company marketing department. So as I was saying, about 25 years ago when I was over there, it was all about having meetings with the sales rep who actually lived down the road in England, but you do it in Anaheim, in California, after paying a huge amount of money and spending 24 hours on a flight, all that kind of thing. So it was a kind of a nonsense experience of marketing and dealership and manufacturing and all those sorts of things all rubbed together. And certainly when it comes to more homespun synthesis and Eurorack, that kind of dealer situation, that kind of donning a suit and going to meetings is just really not what it's all about, and hasn't been for some time. So I think the model that's shown at NAMM as how these sorts of things are done is a little bit archaic, and perhaps it needs to rethink about what it's trying to do and what it's trying to be. Should it be a trade show? What does trade look like these days in terms of being a show? And should it be more open to the public? I think they flirted a lot with it being open to the public in the last few times it was on, and perhaps it felt more nailed down this time. It felt more scaled down, it felt more serious, a little bit more business-like, rather than the woohoo, look, everybody's here and having a lovely time. I don't know what the future is going to hold. What I do know is that Super Booth is coming up, and that's going to be packed full of all sorts of crazy releases, and so I guess many synth manufacturers were hanging off for that, and probably rightly so. The great thing about Super Booth is it's personal. It's not so much about hatching those multi-million-dollar orders. Maybe it should be. I don't know. Maybe that's where the flaw is. It's more about having that direct contact and interaction with the manufacturer, with the maker of your modules, and to understanding all of that, and the whole word of mouth and social media explosion that it creates. Very, very different to the old school way of advertising in magazines and going to trade fairs and selling through shops. So, I don't know. I mean, if you find NAMM interesting, that's awesome. Do let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. Is it a waste of time? Is it a dinosaur? Or time to put it out to rest? Or is it still relevant? Does it still have stuff? I mean, the one thing that always impressed me about it, I think, is that it attracted artists, real artists, proper artists. All of the endorsees from Marshall and Gibson and Fender and Yamaha and all of these people would bring their artists along, and so you would be rubbing shoulders with properly famous and influential musicians, and that's amazing. There's no other place that really happens, and part of that is because it's a trade show. It's kind of a safe space. It's not going to be full of fans and people dashing about trying to get a hold of a little piece of this famous person. You know, it's going to actually be a bit more sedate and serious and actually in the business of doing the music business, and that is definitely something it has going for it, which I think perhaps smaller shows or other shows don't quite so much. But anyway, I'd love to go again at some point. If someone would like to pay for the entire thing, that would be great. That'd be great. I'll be up for that. So, you know, I can be your brand ambassador or something. Anyway, on with the show. So first up is the 8MU from Music Thing Modular. Music Thing Modular, you say? That's the touring machine, isn't it? Yep. You'd be right. You'd be right. Coming out of Herne Hill. Oh yes, that's manufacturing the Silicon Valley of South London. We have a very non-modular device. This is a teeny weeny sort of credit card sized, not thickness, but in other sizeness, MIDI controller. It's just 8 sliders on a thing. Simple, easy, isn't it? Great. Why has nobody done that before? I don't know. I mean, it's just a pocket-sized MIDI controller. It's got 8 sliders on it. It's got 6 buttons hidden around various bits, and it also has accelerometers, so you can go whoa, and it will move about and will generate MIDI control information, continuous data, as you move it about. So you can control things with sliders, you've got buttons you can press, and you've got ways to tilt it about. So it's a multifaceted, simple mini MIDI controller sort of thing. You could Velcro it on the side of something and just pull it out when you need, just to get that little bit of hands-on control over something. Interesting. Elk Live, this is jamming over the internet. This is something you may have seen. Myself and Gaz Williams did a video all about it using this bright yellow box of theirs that connects to your network on the internet and gives you extremely low latency connection so that you can jam in real time over the internet, which is not something you can normally do because you're having to deal with massive amount of latency. But this reduced it to such a level that it really genuinely felt like me and Gaz were in the same room jamming, which is what you want. It makes music happen. And that was very, very cool. It has its ups and downs and pros and cons, some fiddly technology and bits and pieces, but ultimately the technology worked and it was a joy to use once you were in there. Now, one of our criticisms was that it costs a lot of money. You've got the box to buy, and everybody needs a box, and then you've got a subscription service in order to use the servers, in order to do the video link and the audio link and all that kind of thing. And so it ends up being quite expensive for something that you wouldn't necessarily be using all the time. If you are, great, don't even worry about it. But for most of us, I imagine it would be an occasional thing. And so it's a bit expensive for that. So what they've done now is that they've decided to make it free, at least for a beta test period. Not only that, they've also ditched the box. And this is curious, because I was under the impression that the box was vitally important to making this whole thing work. To getting that latency down, you needed to have this connection that was outside your computer, not through some other form, that was directly talking peer-to-peer, that kind of thing. Well, now apparently you can do it without the box. No box, just do it from your regular computer, do it over Wi-Fi, whatever, and it will work. How well does it work? Well, I don't know, because it's only available on Mac OS. Mac OS? Who uses flipping Apple in these days? Honestly, I can't quite believe it. So for Windows people like myself, you're denied the access to this kind of thing, but apparently Elk says it will be along it sometime soon, and if it ever is, then hopefully I'll get the chance to try it out again. But meanwhile, at NAMM there was another company that had a similar idea with the same thing, but they were talking about much larger distances, but they also had a box and a subscription. So I can't remember the name of that. Maybe someone can let me know in the comments what that was, but it is evidently something that people are trying to crack, that trying to get this to work, and I think that's a positive thing. I don't think people need it as much as perhaps they think they do, but I guess at some point in the future it would be interesting to go into your DAW and just to be able to choose an artist, and they'd be able to jam and play straight into your project. I mean, you can do that already in a kind of an offline way, where you go and employ an artist, you send them the tracks, they put the thing down on the tracks, and then that comes over, and then you work on the tracks. So there's this toing and froing thing going on. But to make that a live feature within Studio One or Pro Tools or something could be interesting. Is that something in the future that we would see? Would that completely destroy the studio system? Because no one is ever going to have to leave the house for anything ever again. I don't know. Anyway, it still remains interesting, and I'm looking forward to giving it a go once it comes on Windows. Bastl Instruments have released the Bestie. This is the successor to Dude, which is a terrible name for anything, I have to say. Bestie, it's not too bad, I guess. What is it? It's a 5-channel mixer, mate. That's what it is. It's a mixer about this big. So it's quite small. Desktop mixer, no frills. It's not, you're not having to deal with the whole console thing of all this stuff that for some reason we're always given when you say, oh, a mixer would be really useful. I just want to mix a couple of things together so I can hear everything at once. Oh, okay, here you go. You've got these massive bands. I don't want EQ. You've got 18 aux. I don't need all these aux sends. What's that about? Got these massive, I don't know that I really need faders. I just want to set some levels so I can hear more than one thing at once. This is that sort of thing. It's called Bestie. It's 5 channels. It has a weird feedback system so that you can take stuff out and route it back to itself, which makes it even crunchier than it already is. I mean, I believe that all of the channels overdrive and will send themselves into some nice levels of saturation, but you do also have this feedback loop, I think through channel 3, which just goes extra crazy. It has mute switches, which is really nice. Got headphone out, which you can go pre or post craziness or something. Oh, before the mute, so you can mute something but still hear it on your headphones and then drop it into your mix, like you know what you're doing. That'd be pretty awesome. It's all USB powered, very simple, straightforward, masses of distortion in that middle channel if you leave that unplugged, which is just sounds like a load of fun. So yeah, great. It's exactly what we need on the desktop. Little mixer, lots of fun, saturation. Bestie. Bitwig Studio version 5. I'm a big fan of Bitwig. I do really enjoy it. I've been there since the early days because I was never really cool enough for Ableton Live. I mean, I used it. I did get away with it. I could pull it off sometimes. Give me a launch pad and I could pretend like I had the right... I had all the right credentials to do that sort of thing. But No, I think people would see through me when I'm trying to look at the little tiny little clips on the screen. I'm going, oh, what is that doing? Oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm doing. And so Bitwig kind of stepped in and helped folks like me who have fatter fingers and less street cred and need to be able to see things in slightly larger fonts and slightly less complex. And Bitwig Studio was there for us. However, it's expanded and evolved into this quite extraordinary piece of software. It has this modular engine which allows you to kind of rewire exactly how it works into everything else. So you pull devices across and you've got different modulators going into different bits of effect or instrument or MIDI control. You can build synthesizers within it. It has this polygrid system where you can layer up modules from the synthesizer building blocks and sequencers and effects and bring all that up just to produce a little modulator which then modulates the filter on a cutoff in something else. It's immensely versatile. So when a whole new version comes along, you go, oh, well, this is going to be amazing. What have they got? What have they got? Have they rep what? And it's like, oh, and it's quite mild. It's a mild update. I mean, that's not to take anything away because it's an extraordinary milestone, I think. And I think what's important out of this new update is how now anything is possible. They've opened up the whole thing because the mixer front end, so the audio DAW front end, has now become modular too. So while you could set up devices to modulate a synth, to modulate a thing, to modulate an effect, and all of that was nice. What you couldn't do really is modulate the mixer. And now you can. So the mixer, that means the pans, the ascends, the levels, all of that routing and audio mixing side of it, you can now just modulate the heck out of. And that's pretty awesome. But also, they've given you a few new envelopes. It just sounds weird because that seems to be the thing that they led with. Bitwig Studio 5. Here's an envelope. You go, well, what am I doing with that? It doesn't really matter. What they've got is these multi-segment envelope generators which you can use as modulators throughout the system. So it's just a different way of creating a modulator which you can essentially use as an LFO or just a one-shot modulation deal with which to move a parameter within Bitwig Studio. They're very sort of complicated and, well, I mean, simple but complicated, or at least they have a depth and a richness to them. There's things where you can draw, there's things that you can fold, there's all sorts of exciting things if you can possibly get excited about envelopes. They've also done improvements to the clip launching and other bits and pieces I'm sure are extraordinary within there. Overall, though, I have to say there's a slight bit of disappointment that although the mixer is now modulated, they didn't really change it. The mixer is an odd looking thing. It could really do with just a bit of a spruce up, something just to make it slightly less, I don't know, I would just like a nicer looking mixer, that's all. It just seems a little bit too simple on the mixing side. But hey, it's constantly being upgraded, it's constantly in development. It's always exciting to see what they do next, and I'm looking forward to trying it out on my Surface Pro 9, which I have here. Now, I've not done any videos on the Surface Pro 9 yet because I just haven't had the bleeding time. I've had it since October, I think it is, so time's getting on long enough, you would say. So I'm trying to commit to, after Super Booth, spending a couple of weeks doing purely Surface Pro 9 videos. With audio interfaces, with bits of software, and try to nail down exactly what it can do. Why would I do that? Because I've been making videos on the Surface range for years, and I want to continue doing that. I think it's a useful, creative, interesting form factor device for making music on. It's like an iPad, yes, but it uses proper real software, and that's its real bonus. And of course, we're running Bitwig Studio 5. Now, Intellijel released this enormous thing. It's called the Cascadia, and it's quite a machine. It's a chunky thing. I mean, it looks a bit like, dare I say it, looks a bit like the Behringer 2600. That sort of size, and also that sort of functionality. And by that I mean the ARP 2600 functionality. It's a big semi-modular synthesizer with lots of interesting modulation and patchable potential. The Thing with the Intellijel thing is, though, they do things a bit differently. It has loads and loads of modular style processing inside. You've got sample and hold, you've got wave folders, you've got utilities, mixers, inverters, envelopes, modulators, all sorts of stuff built in, which is going to help you transform, which is ultimately a 2-oscillator semi-modular synthesizer, into something that's a bit more out of this world. They've gone about things slightly strangely. Things are in different places to where you expect them. You kind of expected a duplicated oscillator kind of thing, but you've got one oscillator here and one down here, and a mixer at the top. You've got it feels a little bit disjointed in terms of traditional layout. But it's okay to ignore traditional layouts. I mean, why do what the heck you like? Of course you should. But it's a fabulously intensive synthesizer. It's almost like getting one of their palette cases, their 7U palette cases, and packing it full of their own modules. I mean, I guess that's the thinking behind it ultimately, just trying to provide it behind a single front panel. Something that's integrated, something that's going to make sound immediately while opening itself up to masses and masses of patching and modulation. It's not cheap. It's comparable to buying a modular system of that size, but I think it's better value than all of that, and you know for a start that it's going to work. There's a lot in there that you can do with 2 oscillators and associated parts. So the sound demos I've heard so far, I mean, DivKid and Minor Melodies have both done big videos on it, and it's pretty awesome, has to be said. The styling of it for me is not particularly inspiring. It's a bit kind of grey and white. I mean, that's okay. It's just not for me. I would have preferred black and interesting, or silver and interesting, or colour and interesting. Sort of grey and white seems to be the dullest choice of palette. But hey, I don't know anything. So there you go. That's just my opinion. But otherwise, what a phenomenal entry into the hardware synthesizer department. The Entropy and Sons Positronic Recursive Studio. Kaleidoscopic, futuristic meanderings and modulations or something. This is a little bit of a departure, into video and visuals, which is something that I also really, really like and would love to spend more time in if I had the time with which to spend. But hey, I don't. But this is a box apparently from the future, I don't know, that's got an HDMI output, because HDMI is an eternal connection. And what it does is you've got some knobs, you've got some buttons, and it just takes visuals and go. What's interesting about it, I think, is that it's very high quality. Often these visualizers are a little bit ropey, a bit on the lo-fi side of things. I got the Critter and Guitari IZ, which I thought looked potentially fantastic, and I've kind of discovered that I don't really get on with it very well. The output is just a little bit kind of too glitchy for me, not smooth enough, a little bit too pixelated and lo-fi, whereas this is beautiful, gorgeous, high definition, and I can appreciate that. It's essentially kaleidoscopic, so it will take whatever it is you're running through it and squidge it all about into these beautiful visuals. It can be CV controlled, it can do beat detection. You can stick a webcam on the side in order to include and squeeze through other visuals. It's not a cheap box, sadly. It's not an impulse buy, but it's the sort of thing I would love to have alongside my modular on performances, just to have something that's going through, but something you could also feed through the stuff, the patch you're working on. So yeah, I like it a lot. And you should probably pop over to the website, because the whole story that they present this through is like a sci-fi novel. It's fascinating, and I enjoyed that tremendously. So thank you for that, Entropy and Sons. And if you ever need someone to make a video about why your thing is awesome, then you know where I am. Talking of Critter and Guitari, they've just released a very interesting wooden box. It's called 5 Moons. It's a 5-channel multitrack. So think of it as a Porter Studio, but without the cassette. It's all internal. You've got 5 sliders and a few buttons on the top. Press a button, plug in a mic, record something, record yourself singing or playing, and then press stop, and then you can record another track alongside. You can have the first one loop, or all of them loop, ultimately. So you don't necessarily have to record a 4-minute song of yourself doing the same thing over and over again. You can just record it once and then let it loop and then record something alongside. If you start to fill up, you can then bounce to that first track, giving you more space, and then bounce again, more space. So you can continue to layer and loop and add and record, and it just sits there and it's instant music making. And that's everything that's brilliant about it. It's simple, it's easy, you plug yourself in, you record something, you overdub, multi-track and mix. Brilliant. Downside is it's only mono in, single mono in and a single mono out, which seems odd. There's no panning, there's no stereo, there's no effects inside, there's no EQ or any other facility. It's just purely for recording mono sources and outputting in mono. So without that kind of being able to spread stuff about a little bit, it feels like it's going to get very muddy and very layered and squashed in there. But also you can't even plug headphones in to get... There's not even a headphone output. So it feels like, wow, this is a great thing. And then it's like, but it doesn't hardly do anything. And you have to work out what it is about the simplicity that you like against the lack of features. And where do you place yourself? Do you need more features? Is it always massively feature full that you need something to be? Or are you happier with the limitations and the experimental nature of something which is much more restricted? Don't know. What it isn't is a TX6. I keep seeing this, people going, oh look, it's like the Teenage Engineer in TX6. No, it's nothing like it. They just happen to be similar small format mixer thingies. You know, the TX6 is a synthesizer and sequencer and stuff, whereas this is a 5-track multi-recorder. So no, they're not the same. Not the same at all. But anyway, interesting, I think if it was just stereo, if you could hold a button and move those sliders to make it pan, you know, just a little bit, give you a gain control on the input maybe, little things, a guitar input rather than having to go through a preamp. Yes, marvellous. The Akuto Studio Chord Machine. This is slightly odd, slightly frustrating because they're a day away from launch. They're launching tomorrow and they've kept all their cards a little bit close to themselves over what it's really all about. You know, on the surface, because it's beautifully presented, beautifully photographed, beautifully put across. It looks very Teenage Engineering in its format, in its intention. And I don't know that it is. I think it might just be an accordion in an electronic box, I think. It's got buttons and you create chords with that. It's got a little touch screen which seems to show the chord quality and other bits and pieces, and maybe that has some form of interaction so you can move from one thing to another. I'm not sure, but it is just beautiful to look at. A beautiful website too. You know, they've really done a marvellous job on putting forward this very high-end, very posh possibility. But ultimately, is it just going to stab out chords like we stab out chords? I've even got a chord button stab out chords with. Anyway, it may already be out by now by the time you see this, but if you haven't, pop over to the website quick and sign up, because then you get an 80 quid discount on whatever it is the price is going to be. And if they're giving away 80 quid, makes me think, ooh, it's going to be quite pricey. But hey, we'll see. So perhaps the most interesting thing at the show was the Polyend Tracker Mini. So Polyend produced this tracker some time ago, big sort of desktop, machina-sized device, big screen, buttons, sequencer, tracker. Is a tracker. What's a tracker? So a tracker is an old form of sequencer that I was going to say nobody seriously uses, but of course they do. There's a massive fan base for trackers out there, of course, and you're all gorgeous, and I love you all deeply. I have much deep affection for all of those tracker users. So a tracker scrolls kind of this way, and it's a bunch of numbers that comes up, and you program in numbers, and the numbers do things. You know, so it's like working with a piano roll, except you're not really using the visualization of notes in that way. You're seeing things through numbers on tracks, and then it seems to scroll up and it cascades through all of these things that are happening. It's just another interesting way to sequence stuff. But anyway, the tracker contained synthesizers and sample sounds and other bits and pieces that enabled it to be a standalone instrument rather than just a sequencer. In comes the Mini. So what Polyend have done is taken everything they intended to do with the first one and put it in the format that they originally had hoped it would be. So with that announcement, all the current owners of the trackers went, so you mean that this is the thing that you were trying to make, not this nice lovely big one that we've spent all our money on and having a lovely time with. You actually wanted to make something else, and this is like a byproduct of that because you weren't able, the technology didn't exist to make the real one that you wanted. And now you have, and now I've got the old one that you didn't really like. So there's a bit of grumbling going on. I don't know, we like to grumble about our gear. But anyway, this is a handheld version. So it's a bit Game Boyish, it's a bit like the sample track, a bit like an SP404. It's got that kind of vibe to it, which doesn't thrill me, I have to say. Feels like RSI about to happen. I can't move about. However, it is a fully featured tracker sequencer inside here, and sound engine and sampler engine, and you can now sample in stereo, which apparently you couldn't do on the other one. Crazy, hey? And so you can go around with it. It's very, very portable, battery powered. You can sample stuff and put that in, drop that in, tracker the heck out of it, edit your samples, other bits and pieces, all within this tiny fun size form factor. At $699, it's a serious piece of kit, but it is kind of an all-in-one groove boxing music making machine. You can make whole songs on it, whole tracks without any bother. You've got 8 tracks of sequencing, you've got 8 hours of recording for samples, you've got doodles of patterns, an awesome amount of sequencers, and a built-in microphone, so you can just go around and do it in the park, on the bus, on your lap, off you go. Possibly the strangest thing and the poorest demo at the NAMM show was the Muse Ovations Beatwarp. Muse Ovations were there with some other crossfader box that they were really trying to show, but as a byproduct they seemed to also have this box called Beatwarp, which kept sitting there in the odd photo, but nobody was talking about it. And for the whole NAMM show I've been looking at a couple of Instagram posts going, but what is that box? Social media, does anybody know what this is? And eventually Sonic State got around to doing a little video, and they just, it's like we're none the wiser. We're honestly none the wiser. But it looks like an interesting idea. It has these 4 joysticks that run the sequencer. So you point the joysticks in different directions, and that creates different variations, I think, on the sequence that's going on. A big crossfader in the middle, so they like their crossfaders, which seems to be crossfading between 2 different projects possibly, or 2 different sound engines. It's really difficult to know because they weren't really selling it. And then it's got these 6 faders on the side which don't seem to do anything. I mean, the guy in the video said, oh yeah, you just allocate those to parameters, and it's like, yeah, okay, now what you want to be doing is go, yeah, this one does this, this one does this, that's kind of what you want. Again, I'm available to do demos if people are interested in that sort of thing. But they spent a lot of time talking about how you could see the little LEDs over the side, and how important that was, and how they'd 3D printed the knobs. Don't care about 3D printed knobs, mate. We want to know what this thing does. So I don't know, Beatwarp. They also had a Eurorack module there called, no, I can't remember, Cosmic Warp. No, I don't know. It doesn't matter because they didn't tell us anything about that at all. So go to a show. Don't tell anybody anything. That's always the best way forward. But hopefully more information will be forthcoming. There's been some innovation in the sustain pedal world. Oh yes, Black BT have got something called the SusEx pedal, which is sustain and expression in one pedal. Come on. So not only can you turn on sustain and release it, you can also do this all at the same time, I think, or something. But that's not really what's important. Well, maybe that's what's important. But the big thing about it is that it's completely wireless. So it will Bluetooth itself into your computer, ultimately, or your phone, and allow you to do sustain and expression without it having to be connected via a cable, which definitely has its uses, until you go and look at your synthesizer and go, oh, but my synthesizer doesn't have Bluetooth or USB for that matter, in which case you're kind of a bit scuppered, which is a shame. It does have a physical port for the sustain, so you can put a cable in and use sustain. It doesn't have one for expression, which is a shame, a missed opportunity. Just stick the port in, and then you can control the volume and sustain all on the one pedal on a regular synth. I think that would be awesome. But no, they're really going for this whole Bluetooth thing. And the idea is that if your synthesizer doesn't have that, then you connect it to a DAW and you Bluetooth into the DAW and route it that way. Or you can use an app on your phone, you can Bluetooth it into your phone and then somehow connect your phone to your keyboard. I mean, I guess you'll probably need the camera adapter kit with a MIDI interface on that, then attached to you. So you've got all this stuff hanging off your synth. Doesn't sound like a great idea in a live performance situation. But hey, I think it's interesting. I think it's nearly there. I definitely appreciate the innovation in something which you don't really think about very much. And it could bring lots of interesting things to a particular group of people who use their computer as the main sound source within their gigging or in their live performance or studio. You know, there's some potential there. Sorry, there's somebody at the door. And lastly for this section, before we get into the Eurorack, is the Lumen Handpan. Now apparently they kickstarted this years ago, donkeys years ago, but it's only just come to our attention through NAMM, where they seem to be finally relaunching it as a product for everyone outside of the Kickstarter world. And essentially what it is your traditional handpan. What's a handpan? Handpan is a flying saucer-like metal thing with tuned things on it, a bit like a steel drum, but in this fashion as opposed to that fashion. So tuned a bit like a steel drum, but you hit it with your hands and it just has this beautiful ethereal ambient sound. It's the sound of temples, it's the sound of sitting on top of a mountain somewhere, going om and floating slowly above the earth, feeling the vibes and stuff, and it's just beautiful. I've longed for one, and I just kind of never quite pulled the trigger on it because I'm never quite sure what tuning I want, because you have to you get it pre-tuned and then that's what you're stuck with because it only has so many notes on it. And there's different versions. The proper handpan is also tongue drums, which are similar but usually made out of the back end of a gas cylinder or something. So these are earthy, traditional instruments that have a very ethnic vibe to it. And it's a beautiful thing. But what Lumen have done, so it seems, is they've electrified it. So they've replaced the gorgeous sort of brass rendering of a metallic instrument that connects you to the earth and replace it with a plastic aluminium device that's got all these pads on, which has an internal sample engine which has sampled the handpan and allows you to then play that sound. There's something not quite right. As I'm explaining this, it just makes you think, why have I gone to all this trouble of getting a handpan, and then rather than have it make its own sound, you then have to sample the sound of a handpan that you then put back in the handpan to make it sound like a handpan. Oh, I don't know. But there are obvious advantages to this machine. It can be any tuning, and it can also play anything. So it could be flutes, it could be guitar, it could be synth sounds, that's just giving you the way of playing it that you might embrace in terms of physical interaction with a machine. I mean, that's the idea, really. It's giving you this action in order to create sound and create music, which gives you a whole different approach to what you're doing. And that's a lovely thing. I love it in that respect. It also has a built-in speaker. I mean, it can be completely self-contained. So you can sit out. You can still sit on the up at the mountain. You can still sit up a tree and use it. Yeah, provided you've charged it up beforehand, and you can do it. You know, I think that has a levels of awesomeness to it, while at the same time being, what on earth? Why are we doing this? I just don't know. The demo at NAMM though, best demo ever on any product ever that I've seen. He nailed it. That was just brilliant. Absolutely gorgeous. So, on to the Eurorack. Right, let's rattle through a few of these things, shall we? So, Worng Electronics Acronym. It's a wave-morphing VCO. DivKid's did a great video on this whole thing, actually, so I'll just keep it brief. It's an analog core oscillator with a new type of morphing within it to get from waveform to waveform. It starts off with some sine waves and then very quickly degenerates into lots of other exciting waveforms. Well, by exciting, I mean triangle, and then square, and then some wave folding, which is always nice. You have some individual outputs on the sine and triangle waves and sub-oscillators, and then you've got a wave sort of mix morphed output too. Harmonics abound all over the place with this thing. It looks interesting. I love the styling that Worng, I don't know how to say it, that Worng use on all their stuff. I think it's got a lot of character. It's very much a little bit like Look Mum No Computer, I suppose. But that's Acronym, and it looks really nice. Synths have released a stereo compressor. It's just a compressor, man. It does what you imagine a compressor does. You've got like threshold and ratio and that kind of thing. You stuff something in, you pull the threshold down, it starts to compress, you make up the gain. You've got lights that show you what's going on, and it gives you that ability to squash a dynamic range so that you can hear everything more together. It glues things together, I think, is the idea. It also has a sidechain input, so you can start to pull that compression away or in, depending, like on a kick drum, so you can let a kick drum through, is the idea. This sort of action. That in, that out, that in, that out. But perhaps more interestingly, I would say, is that Synths have also released a brand new educational DIY module, which is also a compressor. Oh yes, it's the Compressor EDU DIY with Moritz Klein, and this is a simplified DIY kit which is designed to teach you about circuit design, just like the entire series that I did over the course of last year. And this perhaps harks towards a whole new series of them, or maybe there'll just be the occasional one every now and again. I'm not sure. That's something we can ask Moritz, because next Tuesday, I think the 2nd of May, we're going to do a live stream, me and Moritz together, and we're going to build it out on the old breadboard to see if we can go through the circuit. I've already done the DIY video of actually building the kit, and that's already available on YouTube. But this is about understanding the circuit and trying to understand it. And Moritz is going to be there, which is going to make it difficult for me, because I like to sit there and go, oh, this is rubbish. But now I'm actually going to have the guy there, and that's going to make, well, first of all, be on my best behaviour, and also going to make me kind of look stupid, because I'm going to have to try to think and understand really hard and really grasp everything properly, which I'll do my best to do. So that's Tuesday night from about 7, I think, needing ourselves a couple of hours to make it all happen. So do come along and join us if you're interested in that. It is available to buy already, and you can come along and build it at the same time and experience those flows of electrons that we'll be doing at that time. Next up is the brilliant Uncertainty from Olivia Artz Modular, or OAM. What is uncertainty? Doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, you're not really quite sure. Does that, and is that important? Ultimately, aren't you just embracing the idea of something that might probably, perhaps be something, and maybe not of another thing? But just to nail it in a little bit more, uncertainty is a very narrow 2 HP gate processor. It generates gates. Now, it has, I think, 1 input, 8 outputs, something like that. Each output has a different level of probability as to whether it will produce something or not. So you send it a gate, and the first one goes, oh yeah, definitely, I'll throw a gate out. The next one goes, yeah, all right, throws a gate out. Next one down goes, well, I don't know, I might just, and throws a gate out, and so on and so forth, until you get to the bottom one where it goes, no, there's just no chance. Oh, right, once in a while, I'll throw a gate out. And so you have this kind of, I don't know what action I'm trying to do. So you have this uncertainty which pulls out of this module. You're never quite sure whether it's going to give you a gate or not, but you do know that the further you go up, the more chance that there is of that happening. And I think that's a beautiful idea. I think it's wonderful. It's also an open source module, and it can load different firmwares. At the moment, they've also got a VU meter firmware, which is quite interesting because it's got LEDs for each of the patch sockets, which means that as you put sound in, it will then show you the level by lighting up different LEDs. But while it's doing that, it also sends out gates whenever those are lit. So the idea is that the louder something is, the more gates get produced. That's interesting. So you can trigger something if you put something in loud or soft, trigger different things. I think that's quite fascinating. And I really like the ethos behind it. Olivia Artz, who's behind Olivia Artz Modular, says that it's a creative space for trans and gender non-conforming artists to express themselves through electrons and modular synthesis. Modbap were at NAMM and have released a new module called the Meridian. It's in the same style as all the rest of the stuff. They've got that aesthetic nailed down now, I think. And this is a dual multi-mode filter array. What does that mean? I don't know, a bit of a stereo filter, I think. One big knob in the middle acts as a macro for moving both the cutoffs of both filters, although both can be also addressed independently. What's quite interesting about it, I think, is that it's multi-mode and also multi-type. It has different types of filter built in, which you can access at the menu system at the top. You can choose whether it's high pass, low pass, or a combination of those, with also band pass and notch too. But you can choose between a ladder style filter, an OTA filter, or a cone filter, which is quite interesting. And then halfway down, you've also got some effects built in. You've got a drive on one side and a phase shifter on the other. Interesting. So there's lots of interesting potential. We just go, oh, it's a filter light. But yeah, no, it's not. It's different filters, and it's different modes of different filters. And then it's overdriven and phase shifted in interesting ways. And they have one last filter stuck up the center, which is a low pass gate, which you can ping, I guess, in order to create resonant and interesting sine waves and other bits of sound and things that come out of it. So it has dynamics built into itself. So multi-mode filter array is a slightly feels like a slightly overblown way of describing it, but it's certainly a fascinating, interesting stereo filter. 4MS are releasing a new line of simpler modules. No, never a bad thing, I think. Lots of modules. There seems to be almost like a critical mass of complexity that we're getting to. We're just going off. More and more features, more and more complexity. Let's make it harder and harder to work bloody anything in these tiny little modules, in these tiny little fields of knobs. 4MS thought, let's just do something simple. So they've got... There's probably going to be more in this range, but at the moment they're releasing two. There's a looper delay. So a delay, it catches the delay, you can loop it forever, and I think you can overdub on that as well, which sounds quite exciting. And there's a sampler where you record in and then play stuff back. Good. Simple in and out. They're relatively wide modules for the simplicity, but it does lay out all the controls quite nicely and just gives you straight front panel access to exactly what it is you're doing. No menus, no diving, no display, just in there, press a button, do the thing, have a good time doing it. That's great. Uncomplicated. Uncomplicated. Talking of uncomplicated, no, the Verbos real-world interface is a bit slightly more on the complicated side. Although, not really. I mean, it's a beautiful looking thing. They always make beautiful looking modules, without any doubt. And what you've got in here is 3 channels of a way to interface the real world into your modular. So it's not just plugging in an input, although it is that. It's also extracting an envelope from that, extracting triggers from that. In 2 of the 3 channels, it's just that envelope extraction, get that modulating through your system. The one in the middle also extracts pitch information. So you could use your guitar, for instance, to throw all of that, pull off the envelopes, pull out the pitch, use that to sequence something. So it's a lot of potential connection between your real world environment and the crazy alternative reality of modular. Quite interesting. CubuSynth also has a dual filter. This one is a dual CS20, it's called, which is based on 2 Korg MS20 filters. So that screaming, crazy, distorted, weirdo Korg filter sound that we all really, really like. CubuSynth has dragged 2 of those together, smacked them into each other, giving you both a stereo filter and 2 mono filters, but also it really likes it to self-oscillate. And once you've got those 2 self-oscillating things together, you've got all sorts of craziness that can happen. And it's got a big knob in the middle that glows green to show that that's happening. So it's really encouraging. It's really encouraging bad behaviour from filters, which I don't think we should stand for that sort of thing. Or maybe we should. Error Instruments and This Is Not Rocket Science have got together to make a module. That sounds weird. Why on earth would they do that? I don't know, but it's called the White Rabbit. I've got one here. Can you hear that? No, I don't suppose you can. But what it is a delay and a reverb, an experimental one, because of course this is Error Instruments, who are just completely bonkers. And then you've got This Is Not Rocket Science, who are also completely bonkers, but in a very different way. And I think these 2 levels of bonkeredness coming together could produce something quite awesome. I don't know yet. I've played with it for 5 minutes, and it's certainly interesting. You've got delays, which are not necessarily weird and different, and you've got reverb, which also is not necessarily weird and different. But you have switches that take it from regular stuff that's happening and you understand what it's doing, into crazy town, experimental stuff. There's not a whole lot of knobs on the front. One big knob, one small knob. That's about it. And you start playing with it and it starts going a bit weird. And that really, I think, is going to be the nature of it. It's reverb but unsettling. It's delay but slightly quizzical. And that is the sort of thing I would like to explore. I actually have a bunch of modules from Air Instruments that they sent me, all wrapped up in this amazing organza sort of stuff. And I'm going to be doing a whole bit of stuff on it. And I think they're going to melt my brain with their weirdness. And I invite that and embrace that wholeheartedly. The extraordinarily named Beneath the Bush of Ghosts is a quad lo-fi sampler. It's made apparently out of old answer phone chips. So you know it's going to sound pretty ropey, pretty lo-fi, I think, in fact including some clicks as well and other pops and other artifacts. But hey, talk about reusing technology, I think that's a great idea. But you've got lots of it. It's super wide, 4 channels of sampling and looping. Record in, loop it, record in, loop it, record in another one, loop it, get it all going. Wow, that's just crazy. There's a little bit of normalization under the surface, so you can, I think, bounce from one to the other, but otherwise it's got 4 independent sampler looper thingies. Bonkers. You've got to make it yourself, although it's actually not that hard because the PCB comes with all the surface mount on it. All you've got to do is add the knobs and patches and front panel and stuff, and they'll sell you it with the chips. So interesting, great name, bizarre, and looks like a lot of fun. The Triphase oscillator is like some kind of super saw going through hyperspace. Is it 3 oscillators? I can't remember. Anyway, it's a bunch of oscillators in this thing where you've got three oscillators, 4 oscillators. What you've got 3 saw teeth buzzing around. And you can adjust the phase. So you essentially get, because the idea of a super saw is you've got a bunch of super saws on top of each other and you just slightly offset them and they start beating like crazy and you get this wonderfully gooey super saw sound. That's what you've got here. You've got these 3 oscillations of sawtooth being pushed out of phase with each other, which then creates and generates this huge sound. And it is a huge sound. Go and watch the demo video and it's quite extraordinary, the sort of sound you get out of it. And it's also uncomplicated. Straightforward on the front, little bit of movement, oh yeah, that's nice, little bit of mixing, you just turn them up and down, fantastic. Huge range of timbres within that quite restricted front panel idea of just shifting these sawteeth about. Great stuff. The TAZM-O from Busy Circuits ALM, the TAZM-O or 0, TAZM-0, we don't really care. So what it is a through 0 analog oscillator. Through 0 is the thing at the moment. The idea being that when we did FM, frequency modulation with 2 oscillators, you would jam one into the other and you'd get this, you would find in there somewhere some reasonably melodic sounds around all of the noise and craziness. And so people have been looking for a way of doing that better. And one of the ways of doing it better is to use through 0 modulation. So you can go negative and positive, I think. Why couldn't you do that before? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. All we know is that a through 0 analog oscillator just responds better to FM and gives you more musically relevant output. So you put the two together and you'll find more sweet spots. It will sound better. It will be less of the clangy dissonance and more of the nice gooey bell sounds and loveliness that FM can provide. But other than that, it's a straightforward, everyday usage type of analog oscillator, which gives you all the sorts of waveforms that you like. It gives you an interesting shape control, so you can shape waveforms a little bit. You've got sub-oscillators, you've got sync and all the stuff as well. So it's a good, standard, straightforward, lovely analog oscillator from Busy Circuits, which also has the ability to do FM really well. We're nearly there, damn it! Let's call this the last one because I've almost ran out of steam now. Making Sound Machine's Farb filter, almost fart filter. It's not quite Farb filter series. This is a series of four colourful and simple modules. Actually, the person from Making Sound Machine said to me that they were inspired by my desire for simplicity. My simple desires, getting through and out there. And so they put together these modules which are just simple. So as a filter, you've got a low-pass filter, you've got a high-pass filter, you've got a wave folder and a wave shaper, I think. is the idea. They're simple textural colouring devices. And each one's just got 2 or 3 knobs in 4 HP. Whack it there, whoosh, turn the knobs, and it does the job. CV, control, audio in and out. Simple, easy, no messing about. You just stick it in and it works as a filter or it works as a bit of wave shaping. Great. Great. I applaud such ideas. Simple stuff. You could probably, I mean, even I could probably make a video in no more than 40 minutes, I think, on something like that. Awesome. They're going to be at Super Booth, as I'm sure is everybody else. But those are looking great. Colourful, gorgeously designed on the front. Just really nice. Lovely stuff. So that's got to be it, hasn't it? That's got to be enough. That's a whole load. This month seems to have gone crazy in some respects. but that's good. We like to have things to talk about. And of course, coming up in the next couple of weeks is Super Booth, which will be mad, I'm sure. I'm going for a day. I'm catching a 6 o'clock flight in the morning from Norwich Airport, which is then going to take me 4 hours to get to Berlin. I don't know why I do this to myself, but it seemed like a great idea. And I'm dragging Arthur, my middle son, along with me too, which is, I'm terribly excited about that. That's going to be great. So I'll be there all day Saturday. I'll be knocking around, saying hello and trying things out and trying not to be socially awkward, while also using my kid as an excuse to hide behind and not to talk to things and say, oh, I'm sorry, my kid's hungry now, we'll better go off and get something to eat. That sort of thing. So ideal. And then we're going to stay in Berlin overnight and then have a bit of explore of Berlin on Sunday before flying home through many hours through Amsterdam back to Norwich. So an exciting weekend for me, but there's going to be lots and lots of stuff there. The news is just starting to bubble up now as we head towards it, and it should be an exciting time. One little tip I can give you is that I know that Bafako has a few things to show. Oh yes, and perhaps that might have something to do with me, just a little tiny bit, which I might let you in on in a week or so. We shall see. On the lead up to Super Booth, maybe I'll drop some hints about what that could possibly be. But do go and check that out on the Bafako stand if you do go along to Super Booth and find out what it is that they've got brewing. Because not just my stuff, they also do their own stuff, and those are pretty exciting too. But no doubt in next month's one I'll be talking all about the stuff that went on over Super Booth. So shall we get together this Sunday and have a talk about it, have a chat about it, or chat about the potential of something else happening, or have at least a talk about what we've been doing here. So Sunday night, all being well, 8 o'clock, we'll get together and have a bit of a chat about all the usual things. I might do a little bit more on the Choral, though I've still got that plugged in here. Maybe I'll do a comparison with the Choral and the Polycinematic. I think you might be interested to see or hear that. So possibly I'll look at those two in the live stream on Sunday. Also with the Chord pilot, I'm still trying to work out what on earth is happening. It's really interesting. But I'm going to keep this little colourful circus of Modular I've got here together. Maybe I'll keep that together for now, and we'll look at that on Sunday. That could be cool. Otherwise, don't forget Tuesday, the following Tuesday, the 2nd, I'll be doing that live stream with Moritz Klein all about the Erica Synths EDU DIY compressor. So much good stuff to come. I'm so busy at the moment, you will not believe the number of modules I've got sitting in a pile I need to get to. Extraordinary. That and other things. Lots of other things. Extraordinary things. Amazing things. So do stay in touch. Do connect up with all of my social media channels, sorts of places. The news that I'm doing on moltenmusictechnology.com seems to be flowing. I seem to be keeping on doing it. I'm pushing it. People are coming and looking at it and reading it, and that's cool. So I'm going to continue pushing on that for the moment, and hopefully that will broaden my audience, and other people will understand that I've got good things to say about stuff. So if you would like to have my view on products as they're released, then do pop over to moltenmusictechnology.com and check out my news feed. That would be super. If you're awesome, come over and join us on Patreon. Throw us a couple of quid every month, and then you can join us on our Discord channel and chat and talk about all sorts of things and be part of this mad Molten experience. That would be super. Well, I hope that's been useful, and in the meantime, go make some tunes.